How many of you all are on Twitter? I bet a lot of you are, aren't you? Well, not as many as I thought. Not many, well, a lot of you probably are, but you didn't want to admit it and raise your hands, I imagine, because apparently everybody's following folks on Twitter nowadays. It's in the news all the time, Twitter this, Twitter that. I've been following Mary on Twitter. You know that Mary, the Mary from Nazareth, Mary and Joseph, that Mary. Really some really interesting tweets she's been twittering out. Here's one I saw the other day. Just saw an angel. Hashtag, not what I expected. And then there was this other one. I don't think Joseph is buying it. Hashtag, where will I go for Christmas? Then there was this other one, she said, this tweet. Let's see. Is it really good news? Hashtag, call me blessed. Well, I'm not following Mary. That's silly, isn't it, to say I'm following Mary on Twitter. But can you imagine what in the world would she be tweeting out if she had to tweet out what was going on in her life this day? What we hear is this song in Matthew's or in Luke's gospel that she burst into after her visit from the angel Gabriel and the news that she was going to bear Christ's son, and the angel Gabriel telling her, your cousin Elizabeth is with child as well. Mary goes quickly to see Elizabeth, and when she goes to see Elizabeth, the child in Elizabeth's wombs leaps for joy, and Elizabeth said, who am I that the mother of the Lord should come to visit me? And then Mary breaks forth in this song. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? What does it mean to say, my soul magnifies the Lord? And the Latin word is where we get the title of that, which you may hear so often, Mary's Magnificat. But how do you magnify God? How do you make God bigger than God already is? In some sense, Mary seems to be saying, my soul, my life, praises God, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. So is that the song, I've been wondering, that would immediately come to your lips if you were passing through the experience that Mary's passing through? How should we really believe that this young 14 and 16-year-old girl whose life is essentially now at great risk, how are we supposed to believe that she's now running around from town to town spouting off this music of joy? Well, I think that the part of the truth is, at least a little bit, that this is a stylized song. It's really a song that Luke weaves from the tradition. Certainly a song in some sense that must have been deeply ingrained in Mary's own body. It's a song a lot like Hannah sings in the Old Testament. You remember Hannah? Couldn't have a child, couldn't have a child, couldn't have a child, went and prayed and prayed and prayed, and finally the old priest said, I think God's going to answer your prayer, and she has a child, and she bursts forth in a song that sounds a lot like Mary's song. A stylized song, if you will, that seems to arise out of the experience of God's people of longing and longing and longing for God to fulfill God's promises, for God to act in their lives and in the history in a way that God said God always would, to come to their aid, to come to their assistance, to answer their deepest desires and needs. It's this song that comes forth from Mary's lips. I'm not sure if it's a giddy song, a happy song. Helen and I were here watching the Chakra Center's Christmas pageant this last Friday, which is always a lot of fun. And I forget which class it was. I think the 3-year-olds. They were lined up here across the front. And they started to sing the song that we all know very well. You better watch out, you better not cry, better not pout, I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. And you know, when the children sing, their faces are lit up in delight. He's making a list, he's checking it twice, gonna find out who's naughty or nice. Santa Claus is coming to town. He sees you when you're sleeping. It goes on like that. The children are like sugar plum fairies dancing along here in the front as they're singing it. Well, as that song's going along, Helen and I were sitting over here in this pew, and she leans over and whispers to me, she says, you know, that's really a bad song. Think about what they're saying in that song. And then as I thought about it, and if you really paid attention to those words, what little children are going to sit around delightfully singing that song? It really ought to be sung sort of more in a different way, shouldn't it? You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. I mean, if you're going to sing according to the words, that's the way you would sing it, wouldn't it? But I don't know why they don't sing it like that at child care center concerts. It just befuddles me a little bit. Sorry, James, I didn't mean to scare you, buddy. He says, never sing it that way again, please, please. So how does Mary's song sound? You know, when I think about Mary's song and what she's saying, you think about this. It's really, sounds to me like a protest song, a justice song. I don't know, think of some other songs that you might have heard before when you think about a song like that. I remember one, I got the lyrics for it. Sam Cooke wrote it in 1963, I think. Bob Lahr will correct me if I'm wrong. Song that goes, I was born by the river in a little tent, and oh, just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time a-coming, but I know a change is going to come. Change is going to come. Oh, yes, it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown and somebody keeps telling me, we don't want you to hang around. It's been a long time coming. A long time coming. A change is going to come. Oh, yes, it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me, please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. There have been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is going to come. A change is going to come. Oh, yes, it will. Is that the song Mary's singing? Maybe Mary sings the Magnificat like Sam Cooke. Or maybe like the people who held hands and walked down the streets and said, we shall overcome, and sang, we shall overcome. Maybe Mary sings it just like you and I sing that today when we're with brothers and sisters of different color and different circumstances, and we hold hands and we sing, invited to sing almost with people who know what it means. We shall overcome. Yes, someday we shall overcome. A change is going to come. Isn't that what Mary's singing? And the Lord shall lift up the lowly. The Lord shall feed the hungry. My soul rejoices. My soul rejoices. What kind of joy is that? That's the kind of joy that begins to understand that this is the way that God deals with us on the basis and in the terms of joy. Joy that gives expression and embodies the reality of his will for the world, joy that begins to work for justice, and joy that begins to sacrifice itself for peace, and joy that envisions a world and a creation that gives expression to what God intended it all to be in the very first place. My soul magnifies the Lord. My heart rejoices in the Lord, my Savior. Joy is the way that God deals with us. Joy is the experience we find ourselves in when suddenly our lives are burst open and exposed to the reality and power and goodness of God at work in God's world, restoring creation, bringing redemption to the people, deciding it's time for things to be the way I meant them to be. Joy is the embodiment of that kind of life, that kind of living. It isn't sitting back and waiting for some wonderful emotion to roll over you as you watch YouTube videos, which I love to do, of children jumping up and down on Christmas morning because they got the present they were so excited about and waiting for, and then dropping it and it breaks, and they're screaming and crying 30 seconds later. No, this is a joy that gives itself 100% to God's call to believe in what God is doing. I was watching on Sports Channel the other night the basketball tournament that the University of Florida was playing. It was the Jim tournament, Jim Valvano Foundation tournament. And as part of that, they kept replaying Jimmy V's speech, this famous speech that he made about 25 or 30 years ago, just before he succumbed in his own battle to cancer. This incredible, remarkable speech at an ESP evening event when everyone was there. He was so sick that he didn't think he was going to be able to come and make this speech, make this presentation, but somehow he summoned this irrepressible joy. You couldn't describe it in any other way. This irrepressible joy to come out on stage and begin to make this speech. And just like Jimmy V, he was just rambling along, just saying whatever came to his mind, talking about his family being there and talking about friends, Mike Krzyzewski and everybody else. He's just going on and on and on. But my most favorite part of the whole speech was when he sort of stopped and he said, "There's some light here flashing in front of me. I think it means I'm supposed to finish up in 30 seconds. That's what the guy's waving about in back. But what the heck? My whole body's covered with tumors. I don't care what that light's doing right now." And it practically brought the whole place down. This envisioning of his call to say what needed to be said. And what he said was, every day do these three things. Every day laugh. Every day think, be engaged in some kind of thought. And every day, give yourself to powerful emotion. Let yourself feel deeply. I think he was describing joy. I think he was describing sort of what we are called to. This openness in our own lives to God, helping us to delight in the world and laugh, helping us to think and ponder what we're called to, and helping us to be moved deeply by the joy that comes in finding our lives in his purpose for us. Last week, after the gingerbread house build, I went over to Winter Park where a number of churches were sponsoring an event together. It's called Bridging the Color Divide. They've been having some different meetings. And what we did last week was we went over to the Heritage Center at Hannibal Square. Wonderful little museum there that has photographs and pictures of the African American community there in Winter Park, their history. About 2002, they started to just ask people to bring pictures and photographs, and they've collected them of what life was like for people growing up in Hannibal Square there. And then there was a woman named Mary Daniels, grew up in that little community herself as a child, has lived there most of her life. She's a docent at the Heritage Center, but she started to lead us on a tour around a city block there, walking down, I forget which streets, New England or whatever, walking all the way almost up to the corner, going towards Park Avenue where the railroad tracks are, which she said back in the day, they were not allowed to cross after 5 p.m. And if they were on the other side, the Park Avenue side of the railroad track, someone would say, "What you doing here at this time of day? Get back where you belong." Well, she's sort of taking us on that tour around that whole neighborhood, talking about the different houses that were there that she remembered from her childhood. And part of the tour was giving her a chance to describe for all those who had gathered the struggle that's going on between preserving their heritage, preserving that sense of community, that life together, while also trying to understand and work with the development that's taking place, but which in some cases leaves no space for them. And my mind got kind of involved in sort of all the politics and the business aspects of it that she was describing. And I didn't realize that each time she'd pause at a house or pause at the Mount Zion or Mount Moriah AME church there, she'd say, you know, God's been with us this whole time. God's been leading us this whole time. It gets tough, but if you just trust in God, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It'll be a time to rejoice. It's like every corner she paused and started to make that statement. And by the end, I began to wonder, what in the world is this? What in the world is she doing? And now, as I've looked at Isaiah this week, I began to think she was a prophet. She was a prophet, wasn't she? Someday the desert shall spring forth and springs of water, the crocus shall bloom, strengthen the weak knees, strengthen the feeble hearts, make them firm again. Like a prophet, like the prophet Isaiah, Mary Daniels was walking around Hannibal Square and saying, I see in my life here, my childhood and what I'm doing now, I see God calling me to a work which is good, which is meaningful, which, and it didn't always sound like it, but which is joyful, which is joyful, which is joyful. I needed to check because I remembered there were some other tweets from Mary that I saw here too. These tweets were from a different time. Friday, Mary tweets, I don't know if I can bear it. If I can bear it any longer. Hashtag. And the sword shall pierce your heart also. And then there was this other tree. Sunday morning, these women, what are they saying? Hashtag. Oh, joyous day. We shall go forth in joy, and we'll be led forth in peace. And all the world in wonder will echo Shalom. Amen.